All right, there you go. So a little bit of Bob's Burgers to break up the monotony of me yammering. Okay, so let's go into hate yet again, which is again just a byproduct of fear. And we have 5 different ways from our reading that help us understand the psychology of hate. And the first and foremost is fear of others. Others, we put that in quote because the assumption is there are people that are different from us. We're all human. Let's just put it that we are all human. A lot of us have different ways of thinking, ways of doing, ways of being, ways of looking. Doesn't matter. We are still all human beings in the end. Okay, so hatred is driven by 2 key emotions of love and aggression. Okay, one love for the in group, which is your group, your thing. There's an in love. And then the group that is favored, and then there's the aggression for the out group, right? So you have your in group, and then there's a hate and aggression towards anything that is not like you. Okay. The group that has been deemed as being different is the out group. Okay. They're dangerous. They're a threat for the in group. The reality is that's not usually the case, but it is a motivation to feel like a community to be a part of is to hate the other. Okay. Which the reality is it's just a fear. It's something we might not know what they're up to. We just don't know, right? A fear of safety, right? When we talk about that hierarchy, one of the pieces in there is safety. And so sometimes if we fear something we don't understand that we deem dangerous, whether or not it is or isn't, we become hateful. Okay. Then we have a fear of ourselves. And this is very important why we have to understand identity and who we are. A fear of ourselves is the things that people that we hate. Like if I hate something about you or whatever, it's really truly because there's something inside me that I hate. And you could probably argue that till you were blue in the face, but when you really sit down and think about why you might hate someone, it's because deep down there's something in you that you don't like. All right. And so for me, I literally just had an incident where I was like, I hate that bitch. Like I remember seeing someone, forget my language, I'm just like, don't like them, don't like them. And then I stopped and I thought, all right, well, if I don't like them, there's something about me that I don't like when I look at them. And then I looked at them again, I was all, oh, that's what it is. What they are doing is something that I've done that I've hated, and because of that, right? Or I fear maybe that they are going to take something that I want, or I won't get something that I want. A lot of times when we dislike other people, we have that fear of not getting the thing or losing something. Okay, so number 3, a lack of compassion. All right, we hate people, places, or things because we have a lack of compassion of why they're doing what they're doing. All right, so and to, so compassion. Let me get you a quick definition of compassion. This is going to help you. It's a sympathetic pity and a concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. So we have compassion for others and we have an understanding like, oh shit, they're going through something. All of a sudden, we don't have that same amount of hate. Instead, in place, we have an understanding and a sympathy. There's also a sympathetic consciousness of others in distress. All right. And our desire to alleviate it. That's compassion. We see someone suffering, we want to do something about it. If you do not have said compassion, which there's psychology that shows that people are not all people are born with compassion. So compassion is something that you kind of actually have to develop. In some cases, some people are born with compassion, others are not. Wild, right? It is not a nature versus nurture thing. It's just the way that you're born. It is just a gene. It's a compassionate gene. So if any of you want to do research on that one for your project, we can do that too. Anyway, so yes, with a lack of compassion, we then create hate. All right, what's our next one? We have hate groups, like being a part of said hate things fills a void inside of us, right? And it's like, oh, that's kind of nasty. It's like, yeah, we many times people who join certain groups, because it creates a sense of community, like this void inside of us, it makes us feel fulfilled. Remember, again, the hierarchy, this actually fills one of those voids in our hierarchy of needs, and so then creates this space for hate. Okay. Unfortunately, when you join groups to feel a part of, we're going to talk about that in vulnerability, that feeling of needing community. There's a natural instinct to want to be a part of a group. So that's why we do this. All right. So it's not that we're bad people or should feel shameful of it. We're trying to fulfill a need. And sometimes the need's right there. And unfortunately, sometimes they're hate groups, right? They're places that promote a lack of compassion and a hate towards others, which is a lack of understanding too. Okay. Also, sometimes, if we're going to talk about filling the voids, we're going to talk about societal or cultural factors or influences, right? You see a lot of hate. I just saw, I think it was the GOPs were speaking or something, and there was some wild hate. Hate towards ugly women, and there was hate towards people who wanted to choose their identity. It's like weird stuff where I'm like, why do you care about this stuff? That's not your business. Like, why are you making it your business, right? Like, things like that in my brain are kind of shocking because that is invoking hate. That is now creating a society where people are being outcast, and we want community. So why would you create an environment where there's a lack of community unless you're creating said groups, right? Hate groups, right? So in other words, we want to be mindful of when we're watching these influences, whether it is of, you know, like the war culture. We have a big war culture in America. We'll talk about that in a little bit, how everyone's always fighting. That's just what America's always done. We can talk about maybe violent video games. I'm not saying that video games themselves create violence, but they do kind of lessen some of our mindsets when it comes to this. And, you know, sometimes we're easily influenced. So, yes, I'm not saying video games create violence, but I'm not saying they help either, right? It doesn't matter. Sometimes just who we are and as humans, this will affect us. But anyway, so there's violence there is what we're looking at, which creates hate. Movies create hate, absolutely. Songs create hate. We're taught to hate the enemy and others different from us. This is what we have been doing since the beginning of time. Unfortunately, when it's so ingrained in society in such a way that, you know, algorithms on social media do this, right? Because you'll like one thing because, you know, someone says they hate something and you agree with that. And then the, you know, algorithm's like, oh, you do? All right, here's some more hate. And it becomes this thing that it's the only thing you see. I don't know. This is just life, y'all. So just be mindful of it. The biggest question here then is, what do we do? How do we avoid this? Right? So when you have an urge, then let's just kind of go down real quick the list. When we come across these things that make us want to hate someone, we have to recognize, where's the fear? Where's the fear? Majority of the fear comes from not belonging or not understanding. So when we have a fear of others, we need to recognize when you have an urge to hate something or someone else, where's that fear? What's making you afraid of this, the others, right? When you see someone, and I don't know what your hate might be towards them, could be anything. Look at it and go, why am I afraid of that? What is my fear? Am I afraid of the way they do things different from me? Is there culture, religion, you know, practices at the dinner table? Like, what is it that I hate? And then I ask, okay, if I hate that, what is it about that I fear? Why am I afraid of it? What business is it of mine that I have to fear that? It's not going to get in the way of my living, so why am I invested in them, right? So that's something to be mindful of. Recognize when we might hate something in ourselves, right? Be mindful of that. When we start hating other people, go, ooh, I don't like that because I don't like that in me. And then we can kind of start practicing ways we can just maybe not do the shit that we don't like, okay? And that could be just maybe living a life of integrity. Just don't do terrible shit and then you won't hate yourself. It's weird. I know you're like, well, what? If you don't steal shit, if you're not being an asshole, if you don't do things that are going to get people mad at you and make your, you know, give yourself guilt and shame, if you can rid yourself of guilt and shame, walk through that, get a therapist, you know, have a group or something, you'll learn to love yourself. Once you learn to love yourself, you actually find a way to love others. Wild concept. Okay, so be mindful of that. Also, let's try and find ways to be more sympathetic to people, right? So I know there's a huge homeless problem. I have heard both sides of it. And a lot of it, if there's hate towards it, there's a lot of lack of compassion in some ways. Not always. There's a whole thing. This is not a black and white issue. But it is to be mindful of why someone might have a hate towards that situation or whatever. I don't know why I do that as a topic, but I do see it a lot because it is overwrought here in Chico. It's important to understand why someone might have a lot of compassion and others might not have compassion, and try and understand that middle ground. Okay. All right. And last but not least, if you're, well, not last, it's 4. We have one more, sorry. So filling that void, who are you involved with? Who do you interact with that is helping you feed said hate, and why? Is it really making you feel good, or is it deep down kind of making you feel shitty, right? Let's really ask ourselves those questions. Are we being true to ourselves, or are we just kind of lying to ourselves? And are we being kind of shitty? We might be being kind of shitty, right? So if you're in a group and that group is hating others, it's going to create a hate in yourself, and it just kind of keeps going. The guilt and shame, when we talk about traumas, these do create traumas. And when we talk about, Freud's understanding of it, these are unconscious traumas that we might hate ourselves because we're hating others, or because we have fears we have not addressed yet. And once you address those, you can free yourself and be like, oh, I don't have to be an asshole anymore. Okay. All right. Last but not least, American culture. American culture has been rooted in hate and violence since before it was the American states, okay, United States. In fact, when Europe first came here, when Europeans first came here, way before the Pilgrims, the French were trying to create their own French Protestant colony. And of course, the Spanish came over, and the Spanish are like, no, we don't like that, because they have their own religious. And so I believe it was Pedro Menendez came through and hung all the French because they were Protestant and the Spanish were not. And they're like, oh, sorry, that's not what we want here. So, I know I'm reading Gone with the Wind. I don't know why I'm reading that right now, but it's this, Civil War, blah, blah. And I'm like, America has been so divisive since before it was America, right? There was a lot of hate when the Europeans and people came from, for religious freedoms, which is garbage, because it wasn't religious freedom. It was religious dominance in a new place, right? So let's be honest with ourselves here. Anywho, long story short, it's our natural instinct to be divisive. It's our natural instinct to want to dominate. For eons, from the beginning of time, this has been happening. I don't know how to fix it. It's probably impossible, because there's just certain personalities that are narcissistic, right? Personalities that just won't change, can't change, because they don't have the capacity for that. It just is what it is. It's human nature. It is what it is. And then sometimes those personalities we flock to because they seem so, I don't know, strong and powerful. And in reality is they just have no conscience or compassion. And for some reason we find power in that. Anyway, long story short, in the end, we are a naturally decisive, human nature. We're raised that way, whether we want to believe that or not. We just are. If you go to church and you believe that your church is, but we're so loving and kind. Are you? Is it? I don't know. Look at it. Is it saying, well, all of our, our religion's good, but that religion is not good? If it's saying that, or that way of living isn't good, is that creating a divisiveness? I don't know. I don't go to church. This is not my place, but this is something for you to be mindful of as you move forward in your daily life, to see where these are coming from. And to be honest, we're not able to save other people. Let other people live their own life. It is understandable if, there is a certain morality that we have to follow where someone murders someone else and we have to try and, figure that out. But for the most part, most people's business is their business, and us trying to control them is only going to make us sick. So try and fix yourself first and then go from there. And once you figure out your own identity, it's a lot easier to understand others. All right. So long story short, last step to combat fear, we're going to talk about vulnerability. My favorite part. Brene Brown has this I'm going to show you really quick. Brene Brown has this incredible video. Absolutely love it. She's hilarious. She's funny. Watch it. Take the quiz after and really look at yourself and understand, who are you and where are you willing to be vulnerable? Because in this class, in order to grow, you're going to have a lot of moments of vulnerability. And don't let it scare you, because that's not the intent here. It might make you feel uncomfortable because you haven't done it before, but we're going to try it and see what happens. Because once you open yourself up to vulnerability and willingness, the whole world is your oyster, and you will be incredibly mind blown about the things that you can accomplish. So go ahead really quick. Watch this video of Brene Brown and then finish the quiz questions, and I'll be right back.